Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you're feeling maybe a bit swamped by just the sheer volume of global headlines lately, trying to keep track of all the moving pieces, well, you are definitely not alone. Our mission today is really to cut through some of that noise, bring you clarity on, well, some of the most complex, fast-moving situations unfolding right now.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut to truly understanding what's happening.
That's the plan.
We're going to unpack the most, important nuggets of knowledge from the sources you shared with us, offer a clear path to being well-informed on these critical global hotspots.
Okay.
We'll really dive deep into the intensified conflict in Ukraine, the escalating and, frankly, pretty unprecedented open war between Israel and Iran.
Which is huge.
Huge. And also revisit the ongoing critical humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which, it can often get overshadowed by these bigger geopolitical clashes.
Right, definitely can. Okay, let's unpack this. Based on your sources, we really have to start with Ukraine. Specifically, that recent, absolutely devastating Russian attack on Kyiv.
Yeah.
Ukrainian authorities described it as, I think the quote was, one of the heaviest and most tragic attacks against the capital this year.
And the numbers back that up, don't they?
They really do. It's stark. Moscow reportedly launched, 400 drones?
Yeah.
And fired 32 missiles.
A huge barrage.
And a 9-story residential building in the Solomianskyi district was directly hit, caused a partial collapse.
Devastating.
The human cost, as always, is just, it's heartbreaking. At least 16 dead, 124 injured reported. That includes 15 fatalities in Kyiv alone. One was a 62-year-old American citizen killed by shrapnel, and there was another victim in Odessa.
Tragic.
President Zelensky, he was quick to classify the attack as pure and direct terrorism. Those were his words. And he called for the whole world, the United States and Europe, to respond as a civilized society responds.
A strong call to action. And Russia's side.
Well, the Russian Ministry of Defense, they confirmed the offensive. They stated their targets were, quote, structures of the military-industrial complex of Ukraine in Kyiv and Zaporizhia.
By the official line. But what's crucial to understand here, and your sources highlight this, is that this isn't a one-sided conflict. The retaliatory strikes are causing significant reciprocal damage.
Okay, yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, for instance, in Donetsk, Ukrainian shelling reportedly led to civilian deaths and at least 10 injured. A multi-story residential building destroyed, dozens of vehicles damaged.
So similar to destruction on the other side.
Exactly. The district head there, Alexei Sesin, reported evacuating injured civilians, some in critical condition. And it wasn't just Donetsk. The Belgorod region, also inside Russia, was apparently attacked with over 140 drones and 83 munitions.
Wow, that's intense.
It resulted in civilian deaths and injuries there, too. Homes and commercial buildings damaged. A woman injured here, a social facility hit there. It's widespread.
And this intensity, this back and forth, does it suggest anything strategically?
Well, one Ukrainian military analyst, Oleksandr Kovalenko, assessed that Russia seems to have shifted its strategy. They're concentrating attacks on one city at a time now.
Instead of spreading them out.
Right. The thinking is it's an attempt to overwhelm air defense systems in a specific area. More focused, perhaps more effective in breaking through.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And that strategic angle, it naturally leads us to the broader diplomatic and, strategic movements, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
We saw President Zelensky recently in Canada for the G7 summit. He was there, seeking more support, more sanctions against Moscow, military aid. The usual asks.
Predictable, yeah.
What was interesting, though, and maybe a sign of the times or future politics, was his unmet expectation to meet with Donald Trump.
Oh, right. Trump left early.
Yeah, he left a day early.
Sure.
The White House cited the, quote, Middle East situation as the reason.
Yeah.
So that meeting didn't happen.
Interesting timing.
Meanwhile, while Zelensky's at the G7, Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu makes his second visit to Pyongyang in less than 2 weeks.
To meet with Kim Jong-un again.
Exactly. Shoigu explicitly said he was there on special instructions from President Putin, and the tone was described as one of military camaraderie.
Military camaraderie. That's quite a phrase.
It is. They met formally, and Russia's Rossiyskaya Gazeta reported the talks were broad and security-related. But here's where it gets really fascinating, according to your sources.
Okay.
They apparently included an unusual tribute to North Korean soldiers who Moscow claims helped repel Ukrainian forces in Russia's Kursk region last year.
Wow. That's a new claim, isn't it? Publicly acknowledging that.
Seems like it. And Kim, for his part, referred to Putin as his dearest comrade. He highlighted the mutual defense part of their comprehensive strategic partnership treaty from last June.
So this deepening military bond between Russia and North Korea,
Yeah.
what does it really signify? What are the implications?
Well, it's definitely a critical development. It signals pretty clearly a defiance of existing international norms, especially, the sanctions on North Korea.
Right, they're basically thumbing their nose at sanctions.
Pretty much. And it shows Russia is actively seeking alternative sources for military supplies, as its own stockpiles potentially dwindle and Western sanctions bite harder.
So this military camaraderie isn't just talk.
No, it points to a very real potential exchange. North Korea possibly providing ammunition. Russia may be offering advanced military tech in return. It's a pragmatic alliance of convenience, if you will.
And one that further fragments the global picture.
Definitely. And speaking of major global shifts, let's pivot now. The situation between Israel and Iran. It's being described as the fifth day of open war. Bombardments from both sides.
Yeah, this is a huge deal, a major new global development, really unlike anything we've seen in recent decades between these two.
Absolutely. And Donald Trump's stance here, according to your sources, it seems particularly, ambiguous. He's expressed a desire for a real end to the nuclear dispute with Tehran. He even suggested sending high-level representatives.
Oh, okay, so sounding diplomatic.
But then, he publicly denies any involvement in pushing for a ceasefire. And he hints at something much bigger coming.
Mixed signals.
Very. At the same time, he reportedly instructed his government to try and meet with Iranian officials, right away, to test their willingness to negotiate.
Okay.
And the U.S. is also reportedly considering transferring those bunker buster bombs to Israel. The GBU-57s, massive bombs designed to hit underground facilities.
Right, potentially as leverage, a stick to go with the carrot of talks.
Exactly. It seems like a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Leverage, diplomacy, threats, all playing out at once.
And Israel's objectives in its attacks, are they clear?
They seem quite clear, reflecting their deep security concerns.
Right.
Primary goals, delay Iran's nuclear plans by maybe 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Hinder Iran's aim to massively increase its ballistic missile arsenal. The goal cited is 8,000 missiles in 2 years.
Wow, 8,000. That's a huge number.
And prevent what they describe as an annihilation plan against Israel.
Existential terms and their tactics.
The sources detail assassinations of, quote, dozens of high-ranking officials within the Iranian regime and security services. Israel also claims control over Iranian airspace and has promised to escalate the campaign.
Escalation seems to be the word of the day.
It does. And interestingly, Israel also apparently targeted state television headquarters, perhaps trying to promote regime change.
That's always a risky strategy, though, isn't it?
Well, the analysis in your sources suggests it's ambitious, yeah. And it might paradoxically just rally public support around the regime against the external enemy.
Right, the rally around the flag effect.
Exactly. And Iran has certainly responded forcefully. State media confirmed an explosion, and sources close to Iranian decision-makers claim Israeli attacks killed a, quote, significant portion of Khamenei's military advisors.
That's a major blow, if true. Could lead to instability.
Well, your sources suggest it raises the risks of strategic errors, which could have, grave implications for their defense, and maybe internal stability, too.
Makes sense.
Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araq, stated Iran will keep responding if Israeli attacks don't stop. He demanded decisive steps from Israel.
So no sign of backing down there.
Not at all. Militarily, Major General Kumas Raidari, he's the commander of the IRGC ground forces, reported 550 drone operations continuously attacking Israeli territory since this phase began.
550 drone ops. That's sustained pressure.
Yeah. And Iran claims some big hits. The Bazan oil refineries in Haifa, they say severe damage, shut down. This was apparently confirmed by Israeli state TV and radio Kan, with 3 deaths reported there.
Our hit on major infrastructure like that is significant.
They also claim destroying a long-range air defense system with stealth drones and striking a Mossad intelligence HQ near Tel Aviv.
Lots of claims. Hard to verify everything in the fog of war, of course.
Absolutely. But the human and economic toll, well, that's rapidly accumulating, and the numbers are pretty sobering.
What are the sources saying about casualties?
Iran reports 224 dead, mostly civilians. Israel states it's lost 24 civilians, with over 647 injured and around 3,000 evacuated from certain areas.
Big disparity, but significant losses on both sides.
And the Israeli army did confirm that 35 Iranian missiles got through their defenses and hit targets.
So the shield isn't impenetrable.
Apparently not against this kind of barrage. Iranian media also reports doctors and nurses being recalled to hospitals. In Kashan, 3 civilians reportedly died from Israeli attacks.
And the economic impact?
Significant. The Strait of Hormuz, crucial shipping lane, has seen disruption. 2 oil tankers collided, reports of increased electronic interference affecting navigation. That's a worry for global trade.
Definitely.
And the SFP gas field, that massive one shared by Iran and Qatar, had its production temporarily suspended after an Israeli attack. Qatar called it a real concern for global energy markets.
Yeah, any disruption there sends ripples everywhere.
And from the Israeli civilian perspective, even though their defenses intercepted, over 90% of the roughly 350 ballistic missiles Iran launched.
Which is an incredible interception rate, technically.
It is. And many landed in open areas. Safety instructions clearly helped save lives. But still, the sources describe damage on a scale Israelis are not accustomed to.
So the psychological impact must be huge, even with the high interception rate.
Seems so. 25 Israelis killed, hundreds injured, dozens of buildings destroyed. The sheer volume of the attack was unprecedented for them.
Yeah.
This intense exchange, the different impacts, it really brings us to the crucial role of military technology here.
Right. The hardware involved is key.
Let's start with Israel's defenses. Your sources describe this impressive layered anti-missile system. They've got the Iron Ray, apparently used for the first time in combat now.
The laser system.
Yeah, against ultra-short-range stuff like mortars, artillery, using a laser beam. Then there's Arrow 2 and 3, developed with Boeing, for intercepting ballistic missiles way up outside the atmosphere.
High-altitude interception.
And David's Sling, made with Raytheon, for medium-range threats, so multiple layers.
A sophisticated network. But you said vulnerabilities were exposed?
Yes. Recent engagements show that even this network has vulnerabilities when facing, coordinated ballistic and possibly hypersonic attacks.
So even the best defenses can be overwhelmed or bypassed. What does that tell us, especially considering Iran's missile capabilities?
That's the critical question, isn't it? Because Israel has impressive defenses, yes, but Iran has been investing heavily in long-range missiles for decades.
They have the largest arsenal in the Middle East, right?
Reportedly, yes. An estimated 3,000 ballistic missiles before this recent conflict kicked off.
And ballistic missiles are just inherently tricky to stop.
Exactly. They're basically in free fall after the boost phase, hitting supersonic speeds, going way up high, then plunging down incredibly fast. Very short reaction times needed.
Okay, so what specific Iranian missiles are causing the most concern?
Well, 2 key models mentioned in your sources really highlight the challenge. First, the Ghidar-1. It's a medium-range ballistic missile, liquid-fueled, carries about a 750-kilogram warhead.
Mobile launch.
Yeah, launched from mobile platforms, which makes them harder to track before launch. Reaches speeds over Mach 5 times the speed of sound.
Oh.
Precision is cited as maybe 200 500 meters. And experts warn that firing these in salvos, maybe mixed with other types like Nemad or Zulfiqar, can just overwhelm defenses by sheer number.
Saturation attacks.
Right. But the real potential game changer is the Fatal one. Iran calls it its first hypersonic missile.
Hypersonic, meaning Mach 5 or faster.
At least. Around 6,100 kilometers per hour or more. Yeah. But the crucial part isn't just the speed. It's the MARV technology.
MARV? What's that?
Maneuverable reentry vehicle. If it means the warhead itself can actually maneuver during its final descent, it can change trajectory.
Ah, so it's not following a predictable ballistic path. It can dodge.
Exactly. It can deceive defense systems, making interception, as one source put it, an enormous challenge. This is seen as a real leap from Iran's older missiles that followed fixed paths.
Okay, that is a big deal. That capability fundamentally changes things.
It seems to. This demonstrated capacity to launch effective hypersonic or sophisticated maneuvering ballistic attacks. It really shifts the strategic balance in the region.
And it significantly increases the cost or the risk of any retaliation against Iran because they can clearly hit back hard.
Precisely. So you have this intense technological chess match, and then layered on top is the complex diplomacy, especially Trump's, ambiguous posture we talked about.
Right. The hints of something bigger, but also the push for immediate talks.
Yeah. Criticizing others for misrepresenting his ceasefire stance, but also reportedly sending envoys. Reflects maybe divisions within his own government. Direct military involvement versus using this crisis to force a new, tougher nuclear deal.
It raises huge questions about the endgame, doesn't it? Can Israel really eliminate Iran's nuclear program this way? Or just delay it for a few years?
And will this pressure actually bring Iran back to the negotiating table? Or could it provoke an even more aggressive response? Maybe even accelerate their path to a weapon if they felt truly cornered?
Those are the billion-dollar questions, and your sources actually outline 3 potential scenarios for how this could play out.
Okay, what are they?
First, the nightmare scenario. Full-scale escalation. This could even draw in the U.S. military directly, especially if Trump's position shifts towards intervention.
Let's hope not.
Second, a mediated ceasefire. This is where maybe Trump actively pressures both sides, using leverage like those bunker buster bombs, perhaps, to force a new, stricter nuclear agreement.
A diplomatic off-ramp, potentially.
Potentially. And third, and this one is maybe the most insidious, a long war of attrition. Something like we see in Ukraine.
Just grinding on.
Yeah. Continuous damage to civilians, infrastructure, morale. A protracted conflict that Israel, despite its military strength, might not be prepared for internally or politically. It's a dangerous path with no clear victory for anyone.
A grim set of possibilities. And while the world is focused on these, huge escalating flashpoints, it's so easy for other crises to get lost in the noise.
Absolutely.
Which is why we need to shift focus back for a moment to the ongoing, truly tense and tragic situation in Gaza.
Yes, it's vital we don't lose sight of that.
Your sources highlight a particularly awful recent event in Khan Yunis. Israeli tanks reportedly opened fire on a crowd of people seeking food.
Oh, no.
The result, according to reports, at least 51 deaths, around 200 injuries. And Khan Yunis is one of the very few places where humanitarian aid trucks can even operate right now.
So people were desperately trying to get aid.
Exactly. There's video apparently showing, quote, shredded bodies. And Reuters interviewed a survivor, a man named Alak, whose testimony is just chilling. He said, "Suddenly, they let us approach. The crowd gathered, and then tank shells started falling. These people are dying, trying to get flour to feed their children."
That's just horrifying, unimaginable desperation.
And the medical situation, as you'd expect, is dire. Nasser Hospital overflowing. Injured people on floors, in corridors, arriving in private cars, carts, even donkey carts. At least 20 were critical.
What was the official response from the IDF?
The Israeli Defense Forces put out a statement. They confirmed a group was identified near a stuck aid truck and also near their troops in the area. They said the details are being investigated.
Okay.
They expressed regret for harm to, quote, uninvolved persons, while stating they operate to minimize civilian harm, but also prioritize troop safety.
A difficult balancing act, but the outcome here was clearly tragic.
And crucially, your sources emphasize, this isn't an isolated incident. There have been almost daily reports of Palestinian civilians killed while trying to get food over the last 21 days or so.
Since Israel partially eased the blockade.
Yes, since they partially eased the total blockade that was in place for nearly 3 months, it paints a truly grim picture of just absolute desperation for basic necessities.
Yeah.
It's clear, wrapping this up, that all these global flashpoints, they're interconnected, they're incredibly complex. From Ukraine's intensified fight and shifting alliances to this new, full-blown open war between Israel and Iran, driven partly by these incredible advances in missile tech.
And all while the humanitarian crisis in Gaza persists, often tragically overlooked. It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? As we witness these escalating conflicts, these new technologies, these shifting alliances, what does success or winning even look like in scenarios like these? And are any of the involved parties truly prepared for the long-term, maybe completely unforeseen consequences of the paths they seem to be on right now?